Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
From November 10 to 21st, 2025, the UN Climate Change Conference, commonly referred to as COP30, is taking place in Belém, Brazil. The city, called the Gateway to the Amazon rainforest, this major global meeting has gathered government representatives from 198 countries, alongside UN bodies, civil society, academia, private sector, and significant delegations of indigenous peoples, women, and youth. Notably, this year has the largest ever participation of indigenous peoples in the conference series, with over 3,000 indigenous delegates registered. Cultural survival is engaging with indigenous leaders and their representatives to understand their goals for COP30.
My name is Bryan Bixcul. I'm indigenous Maya-Tz'utujil from Guatemala. I serve as the global coordinator for the SIRGE coalition, which stands for Securing Indigenous Peoples Rights in the Green Economy Coalition. We are a platform for indigenous peoples to exercise the right to self-determination and free, prior, and informed consent in the context of the transition into a green economy. I am also the focal point from the Indigenous Peoples Caucus supporting the negotiations on the Just Transition Work Program. Some of the most important developments about the Just Transition Work Program include the new text that was released yesterday by the co-chairs. This new text reflects some important text recognizing the rights of indigenous peoples, including the right to self-determination and the right to free, prior, and informed consent. Specifically speaking about the text, the main messages on principles to guide the just transition are collected in paragraph 12. So in the current text, paragraph 12p is one dedicated paragraph to the rights of indigenous peoples. And it also mentions the rights of indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation and initial contact. They need specific protections when it comes to just transition pathways that may impact their rights, territories, and their existence itself. And when we say just transition pathways, we mean mining that might be undertaken in the name of the just transition, or renewable energy infrastructure, or roads that may be established in their lands. So for indigenous peoples, keeping paragraph 12p, it is of the utmost importance because it reflects the cross-cutting nature of the rights of indigenous peoples as it relates to just transition. The other important paragraph for us is 12W, and it's absolutely important because finally the UNFCCC broke the silence on minerals extraction and the need to really have extraction that is, and the need also to address the risks arising from minerals extraction, the environmental risks, the social risks. But we are also asking to address the human rights risks arising from extraction of minerals. And importantly, this paragraph, although it is something that we can work with, it requires safeguards, human rights safeguards, and indigenous peoples' rights safeguards, especially because we are living in a moment where over 50% of the minerals that are being used for the energy transition, including nickel, cobalt, lithium, copper, are currently being extracted from the lands of indigenous peoples. And there are already examples of mining companies encroaching on the lands of indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation. And specifically because free, prior, and informed consent cannot be sought after from indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation, we need to establish, and we not just indigenous people say this, but human rights bodies say that the best way to protect them is to establish intangible no-go zones that prohibit extractive activities and other activities that may infringe on the rights of indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation. They have a right to remain in isolation. They have a right to no contact. And so the policies of just transition must respect these rights. Finally, I want to say paragraph 19 in the current text formulation also recognizes the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as a guiding instrument for just transitions. It is very important that the option 1 in paragraph 19 is kept, that the reference to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is kept there. And then as a final message, I want to say it is still an informal note, so it doesn't have any formal standing. This is not negotiated text yet. It has just been agreed now that the text will be forwarded for negotiations next week. So we as Indigenous peoples here are actively advocating to make sure that the text is not watered down as we go into negotiations next week, and that we keep this text because it's a good basis for negotiations to finally address the impacts of minerals and to finally address the cross-cutting nature of the rights of Indigenous peoples in the just transition pathways.
For more information on the rights of Indigenous peoples, visit cs.org and follow Cultural Survival on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Threads, and Blue Sky.